Please like this video and subscribe to the channel.
Greetings, family, and welcome back to Raising the Vibe. As always, thank you so much for joining me for another video. In this video, I'd like to discuss whether Atlanta is actually under siege. I don't know if people realize it, but there are thousands of cameras located throughout Atlanta that are being used to conduct surveillance of everything that is happening in that city. I really wasn't aware of the extent to which that was happening until I saw
This TikTok video
last week that brought it to my attention. Take a look at this little clip.
Place streetlights in and around Metro Atlanta.
The sensors can record outdoor temperature, capture pedestrian and vehicle movement, and record audio and video.
So, as you can see from that excerpt, even though they're being called
lights,
they're actually sensors that can track pedestrian and vehicle movement and actually record audio and video. So that's surveillance. And it's the kind of thing that I've seen in movies about what the future would look like when all humans are on lockdown and being controlled and monitored and restricted to those so-called smart cities that we've been hearing quite a bit about in the news lately. So of course, me being me, I had to dive in and take a deeper look at what's going on in Atlanta. And the results of my research indicate that for the most part, Atlanta is pretty much under siege. And I guess Atlanta residents know this. Does the rest of the country know this? Is it coming to a city near us soon? Those are the kinds of questions that this information raised for me. Before we delve into it all, I would ask that if you're not a member of the channel, that you subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell if you want to know when I upload content, and click that thumbs up button if you like this video. And now let's get into it. So this initiative, as they're calling it, is called Operation Shield. And it's been in effect actually for quite some time, to my astonishment. This Operation Shield was first announced in 2011. So that's more than a decade ago. And this clip from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution confirms that of the top 10 most surveilled cities across the globe, 8 of them are in China, and the other 2 are Atlanta and London. Okay. And with regard to the question of whether this high level of surveillance is coming to a city near us, that article tells us that live video surveillance is ramping up worldwide. So in my mind, Atlanta perhaps is where it starts, for all we know, but that is not where it is intended to end. Now, apparently, they've been installing cameras in London since the mid-1980s, as you can see from this clip. More recently, the politicians in London came up with an ultra low emission program, and they've been installing additional cameras for that purpose. And apparently, Londoners aren't having it, and they're destroying those cameras. But of course, I haven't read a single article about Atlanta citizens attempting to do anything to the cameras in Atlanta. So I guess the first thing to note is that Operation Shield is not really being run by the government or the police department in Atlanta. Instead, it's being run by the Atlanta Police Foundation. And what's interesting to note about that is that the Atlanta Police Foundation is primarily funded through private donations. Let's take a look at some of their financial records, at least the ones that they post on the website. So as we can see from the clip I'm going to show now, in 2019 and 2020, the Atlanta Police Foundation had a bit more than $20 million in net assets. Then we can see from this next clip, by 2021, the foundation had approximately $40 million in net assets. And then by 2022, the foundation had more than $50 million in assets. Which is pretty significant for a private foundation that is funding a public crime prevention initiative. So the Atlanta Police Foundation does have a website. It lists their members, and unfortunately, there are no pictures of any of these members other than the president and CEO, who is Dave Wilkinson. So let's just take a quick look at him to get an idea of perhaps the type of people that make up this organization. But I encourage you to look it up for yourself, because they tell you the names of the corporations and law firms and so forth that they come from, but they just don't have any pictures attached. As we can see from the next clip, Dave Wilkinson served for 22 years in the United States Secret Service, and he served under Bill Clinton and George W. Bush, among other presidents. He was appointed the president of this Atlanta Police Foundation in 2005. The way the foundation set up Operation Shield is that it runs through a program called Connect Atlanta, which includes, of course, public cameras and surveillance equipment, as well as surveillance equipment from residents and businesses in Atlanta that have the option of linking their own video and surveillance equipment to the system. As we can see here, there are supposedly two options. Residents can voluntarily link their camera equipment with the system, and then if an incident occurs in their neighborhood, the Atlanta Police Department will reach out to them to request the footage. That is what we are told in the information that's publicly available. As for businesses, however, they can link up to the system, and then the police department and the monitoring station has full access to those business cameras in real time, 24/7. One of the things that's really interesting is that the public cameras are state-of-the-art blue light cameras. And as we saw from the clip from the TikTok video, those are the cameras with the sensors that can track pedestrian and vehicle movement, as well as recording video and audio. Now, going back to my initial question of, is a smart city like this coming to a city near you? How many of you in America live in major metropolitan areas where blue light cameras have been installed? Let me be one of the first to raise my hand, because in the area I live in, we see blue light cameras here and there. And I imagine that the plan is just to increase them until we're all on surveillance lockdown, as Atlanta currently is. As it stands at the present time, there are more than 16,000 cameras linked to this system in Atlanta. So we are told that the bulk of the cameras are owned by private citizens and businesses, and that there's actually a program to allow tax-deductible purchases of cameras, as well as a lease program where cameras can be leased through Georgia Power, and perhaps just add it on to your electric bill. The information available tells us that 4 of the universities in Atlanta, including Morehouse, Spelman, Clark Atlanta University, and the Morehouse School of Medicine, partnered together to install over $700,000 worth of cameras. Now, I want to say that having cameras on a college campus in various locations is probably a good idea in terms of keeping college students safe. And as a parent who has sent my children to college, I'm in favor of it. I think that college campuses can be very dangerous, sometimes because outsiders are trying to prey on the students, and sometimes because they're predators among the students themselves. And so that's not a bad idea. The question is, however, do we really want this level of surveillance outside of a college campus, where at least many of us have thought that we have some expectation that we're not under constant surveillance while we're walking along streets or moving through a city, through the city of Atlanta in particular? According to an article in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, back in 2019, there were already 11,000 cameras operating around Atlanta. And as you can see, the clip tells us back in 2019 that if you were in Atlanta, you were probably on camera. That was with 11,000 cameras. Now we're in 2024 and they have more than 16,000 cameras. So the coverage is even greater. And the fact of you being on camera, tracked, monitored, or at least with the ability to be tracked and monitored, is even greater. But take a look at this clip from that TikTok video in terms of the real-time surveillance and how it is being used.
The people monitoring the cameras have the ability to move those cameras 360 degrees. They can zoom in and out on whatever's happening in the area of the camera. We have highly trained civilian personnel. Not only are they monitoring radio traffic, they have the ability to communicate directly with the officers on the street, and they're also proactively monitoring, looking for criminal activity.
So as you can see, it's a very pervasive program. They have employees in a monitoring station watching these cameras, and they can communicate with officers to let them know what they're seeing in these cameras in terms of crime, suspects, whatever it is they wish to track and monitor. And I imagine that some people in Atlanta are quite happy about this system because they feel safer. But the question is, how much of your freedom are you willing to give up for what would appear to be safety? Because things can still happen to you. There's still some lag time between the ability to call the police and get them over to you. And even if there isn't, is the safety worth being monitored on camera every day when you're outside in public in the city of Atlanta? My answer would be, that's not something that I would want to happen. But as I mentioned before, there are already blue light cameras in my town. And I'm sure that many of my viewers in large urban areas in America have seen those blue light cameras starting to pop up in your town as well. To me, this is like a scene from a movie. They show it to you over and over and over and over, thereby using your energy to help bring it into existence. And that's exactly what we're starting to see now. A world that looks like these movies that show citizens being tracked and monitored at all times. Remember that movie, Enemy of the State, with Will Smith that came out in the late 1990s? And it showed them using cameras really all across Europe and America to track Will Smith's whereabouts. That was the first time I became aware of the extensive use of cameras in the West. And apparently, it's just been growing and growing and growing ever since then, to the point where Atlanta, Georgia is now one of the top 10 most surveilled cities, up there at the level of, near China. That just blows my mind. And what really blows my mind is that the citizens in Atlanta don't seem to be at all up in arms about this. I don't know. I don't follow a lot of news. Maybe they are complaining, but they aren't doing anything about it as far as I know. And then the media is trying to tout the fact that this foundation, Atlanta Police Foundation, is being run on private donations. As you can see from the next clip here, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution makes much of the fact that Atlanta has access to approximately $300 million worth of camera equipment, but the taxpayers have only paid for a very small sliver of that system. But is that really a good thing? It's not funded with public dollars. It's not under the control of public entities that are run by people who are elected or at least hired and able to be fired from a public position. This is a privately funded foundation that is sponsoring all of these cameras in and throughout public spaces. Who are these private donors? That's a question to be asked. How can one control these private donors or the system that they've set up? Do the folks in Atlanta actually have an option to dismantle this system? Or because it isn't government run, is it the case that it's out of their hands? You don't like it, you don't live in Atlanta, because if you're in Atlanta, you're likely to be on camera. And as you can see from this clip that I showed earlier, they're saying that downtown Atlanta is absolutely blanketed in cameras, and they're covering all of the hotels, all of the event spaces, and they also have license plate readers everywhere. And they're saying that the cameras that they're using are top flight cameras with 360-degree views, the ability to tilt, to pan, and to zoom in. Maybe it's worth it in downtown Atlanta when large-scale events are happening, but are those participants aware of what's happening? For example, I know that one of the Divine Nine fraternities has a huge event in Atlanta every year. The question I have is, how many of those participants are aware that every time they're moving around the city of Atlanta, they are under video surveillance by cameras that can also record audio as well as video? I've been to Atlanta during the pandemic, took my children, stayed in a downtown hotel, walked around, went to malls outside of the downtown area and other places, and I wasn't aware of this large-scale surveillance system. So there's some footage somewhere that has been recorded of my children and I outside of the hotel and walking around in downtown Atlanta. Will I be eager to go back to Atlanta again in the near future? No. Am I glad that although I considered going to that big event that starts at the end of next month, I decided not to? No, I'm not mad at all. I'm glad I decided not to go. I probably won't be rolling through Atlanta again anytime soon. And I think the big question that I have is, what has happened to Americans? Those proud, fighting citizens who stood up for their rights, who would protest at the drop of a dime, who were willing to sacrifice to have the kind of country we wanted. Seems to me that these days you can do almost anything you want to American citizens. You can let tons of illegal immigrants come in and start spending taxpayer money to support them when the taxpayers themselves are struggling because of a shaky economy with high inflation. You can install cameras all around the city and track and monitor citizens in one of our major cities with no consequences. I haven't seen any large-scale protest, any kind of thing that those Londoners are doing to those low emission cameras where they're taking them down or anything like that. I don't know. I guess the question that I started with and the question that I still have is Atlanta under siege? Blink if you guys down there need help. And really for all of America, there are a lot of things that are going on in America that are harmful to American citizens, and I don't see us doing anything about them. The thing we mostly do is to make videos and complain, but when are we going to join together? Go down there and cover the border. Go down to Atlanta and reconvert it into the type of city that we want to see it. Deal with these blue light cameras that are popping up in urban areas throughout the rest of the country. What are we going to do, my fellow American citizens? Just sit here until they have us in a situation like Hunger Games, where there's just a small elite at the top and everybody else is hungry, barely has a place to live, and is tracked, monitored, and controlled? That's what it looks like it's coming to. I'm waiting for us to stand up. When do we stand up and take back control of our country? I have seen some proposals. I do know that we need some kind of term limits to address these extremely senior citizens who are running our country and are clearly out of touch with what the citizens want and what we need. Seems to me you can just let in tons of people across the border and spend all the taxpayer money taking care of those people. You can destroy farms where produce is being grown and cattle is being raised in a safe manner because the government comes up with some crazy theory about why they have to be destroyed. You can send well more than $1 billion of taxpayer money to a war against Russia that most of our citizens don't support, as well as to other military operations that most Americans are not in favor of. And it seems to me that the federal governments, the state governments, and the municipal governments are doing a whole lot of things that are directly against the interest of the American people, and we don't seem to be doing anything about it. In the words of Bob Marley, it's time to get up and stand up for our rights. But that's it for this video. I really just wanted to point out the high level of surveillance that is going on in Atlanta. If you knew, kudos to you. If you didn't, like me, how astonishing is it? And what exactly should be done about it, if anything? Is it a good idea to have all those cameras, to have some feeling of safety, or at least the ability to catch perpetrators of crime after they've committed crime? Or is it more important for us to be free of surveillance, of being recorded, of having our license plates read every time we're in an urban area? Because it's happened in Atlanta. We already see it trickling into other urban areas. How long before that's the same thing that's going on in a city near you? That's not something I want. But what do you think? Do you welcome that into your area? Or do you want to exclude that level of surveillance from the cities or towns near you? I think is a really interesting question, and it goes to the heart of who we are as Americans. So let me know what you think. And until next time, family, peace and love, love and light.
Please like this video and subscribe to the channel.